He sued Disney, defended the Catholic Church, backed Democratic candidates, promoted education, and built a thriving family business. Part 2 of my interview with Wiley Aitken. That's next on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Memorial Care is transforming the way healthcare is delivered, keeping our communities and businesses healthy by guiding them on the path to wellness with easily accessible hospitals, physician offices, and outpatient centers. Memorial Care, leading the way.
Hi, I'm Reiff. I recently interviewed Wiley Aitken, a celebrated trial lawyer and influential Orange County Democrat. He talked about his modest upbringing, events that shaped his life, and inroads being made by his party in GOP-dominated OC. You can watch that show on YouTube. Now, here's more with Aitken. He discusses a couple of his big cases, his support of education, and running a family business. He also talks about what's wrong with politics, including the shabby way he says fellow Democrats treated his candidate, former OC Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, in last year's Senate race. Loretta ran against Kamala Harris for U.S. Senate. You've backed Loretta throughout her career, and she's won many times, one for Congress. She got her clock cleaned against Kamala Harris, and the party really seemed to pile on her. And so talk about that, and talk about the influence of the Bay Area and how Southern Californians, just get lost in the shuffle.
Well, it's part the Bay Area, but it's probably more correctly the, quote, establishment. The problem I've seen with the Democratic Party is that we used to be the party that was open to everything and new ideas and new candidates, and we were very careful not to start screening people and building up litmus tests. At the presidential level, we saw a Democratic National Committee that's supposed to be open to all candidates working for Hillary and trying to discourage and work against Bernie Sanders. Now, doesn't matter what you think about Hillary Clinton, doesn't matter what you think about Bernie Sanders. The reality is it was totally inappropriate for the, quote, establishment.
Just for the record, were you supporting Hillary or Bernie?
I actually supported Hillary, but I've been a huge fan of Bernie during the course of his career. I took a very low-key role in that campaign, to be perfectly frank. And I was very offended by the way it was being handled. Mm-hmm. But I thought, well, even despite all of that, there's no way we're going to lose to that guy. So, goes to show you how brilliant I am. and I'm not always right in my predictions.
So back to Loretta.
So Loretta, of course, got victimized in many respects. Emily's List, for instance, which is to promote pro-choice women candidates throughout the state, the country, even on a nonpartisan basis, whether Republican or Democrat. They never play in an area where there is no reason for them to be involved. So there was absolutely no reason for them to get involved in California. Either Kamala Harris or Loretta Sanchez was going to be the next United States Senator. Both were pro-choice, and Loretta had a 100% voting record with Emily's List. Yet they chose to not only endorse Kamala with no interview or discussions with Loretta, but then they actually sent out pieces of literature urging people to give money to Kamala Harris to protect the Emily's List issues in California. Well, Emily's List issues in California were 100% protected. And so it was again, the establishment, the people sitting back in Washington running Emily's List, they try to decide who's going to be the new senator, who's going to be this, who's going to be that. The Democratic National Committee engages in it. The Democratic Party engages in it. They endorsed Kamala for no reason that they needed to. They were both highly qualified candidates. I've always had a good relationship with Kamala. I supported her when she was a candidate for Attorney General, and there was no reason for the party to get involved. But they should have just let nature take its course, or political nature take its course. But I think they think that they are so much smarter than the rest of us, and that they should be able to ordain people, and they should control the process. That is not democratic, and I mean a small d. And the reality is, it shouldn't be tolerated on either side.
Is that just the way politics is now?
Well, politics now has gotten so partisan, as we well know, and gotten so everything is a loyalty or litmus test, and nobody wants to compromise. You go back to when I grew up in politics, John Kennedy, everyone would talk to the other side, work out compromises, work together, get things done, have different viewpoints, which is what public policy is all about, but not to the level that we've seen. And nobody needs to hear that from me. Everybody experiences it every single day.
Let's talk about your firm, Aitken & Cohn. It's really...
It's more dramatic. It's Aiken Cohn.
All right. Well, I said and Cohn. You're right.
Yeah, right.
Aiken Cohn. By the way, yeah, I also see you got a little asterisk in between. It's very difficult for people to know whether you're supposed to put commas or dashes or nothing.
Oh, we have a tiny little star or something.
So what's your advice for just...
That's the artistic side of me.
Okay, all right, fine. And so that will remain a stumbling block for every journalist who's trying to write about your law firm. But tell me, it's a family business. You've got a lot. You've got your daughter, your son, your son-in-law, right? That's
two sons.
Two sons,
and a daughter, and a son-in-law.
And doesn't it get difficult? How do you separate, the family stuff and the business stuff? And does it ever creep in?
It really doesn't creep in, and in part because all of the kids weren't even going to be lawyers. Went and did study and had different...
You didn't force them?
I did not force them. I didn't even suggest it. And all my lawyer friends who are so frustrated that none of their children have gone and become lawyers, there's lots of reasons for that, but one of the main reasons I said is don't push them. Let them just tell them do what they find the most interesting thing to do. And they all headed out in different directions. And at the end of the day, they all ended up in law school, and they all then went in even to corporate firms. And Ashley went in to a corporate firm and went into the U.S. attorney, federal prosecutor role. And then they ultimately migrated into the firm because when they had a chance to see the full landscape, they decided, hey, I'd like to be working with Dad and working in a firm that represents people who are unrepresented, do it on a contingent basis. Everybody gets fair treatment without regard to their wealth. We represent wealthy clients, we represent very poor clients, but we represent victims, whether it's a company or an individual. So they all migrated into what they thought was a beautiful way of blending their political, their social, religious philosophy with what they do day in and day out.
Just to play devil's advocate, somebody looks at the firm and it's a very successful firm. They say, well, if it's all family people, you're like passing up some really talented people from the outside who could be part of the firm.
Well, Rich Cohn, Aiken, Cohn, Aiken, or Aiken, Cohn. See, I can't even remember it. Rich is a very talented lawyer, and we have two associates who are brilliant young lawyers who are not members of the family. What we've been able to do is we kept it small, not because we wanted to keep it in the family. We kept it small because we wanted to be able to be very individual in our relationships with our clients. And so the keeping small has kind of skewed the numbers because we see a lot of talented people come through. We have a number of law clerks go through. We get the best and the brightest, and we're very fortunate in that regard. And I'm sure there'll be some continued growth, and that it will probably not be in the family direction. I think we've used up all three kids that Betty gave marvelous motherhood to, and so you'll see more diversity, I guess. But nonetheless, you're not going to turn down somebody very, very talented, because I think I can honestly say that if anyone ever talked to the people who know Chris, our son, Darren, our son, Ashley, our daughter, all will have very high opinions of them as individuals and as of lawyers, without regard to whether or not they are or are not the son or daughter of Wiley Aiken.
Let's talk about some of your big cases. You've had a bunch of them. On the show we just did, you referenced Disneyland. What was that case about?
Well, Disneyland had to do with the fact that private amusement parks were not regulated in any way and were outside the discussions of safety. And of course, a very serious tragedy occurred on the Columbia, and which destroyed a family's life, killed the father, badly maimed the mother in front of their 5-year-old child on Christmas Eve at the happiest place on earth. And then what happened afterwards unfolded a terrible story of poor maintenance, poor management, some cover-up issues. You may recall, and this was all in the newspaper, that when the incident happened, they sealed the area off, cleaned it up, and then reopened the ride so that within an hour or two, no one knew that anything had even happened. And when the police arrived to investigate, they were taken to corporate headquarters, spent 4 hours talking to the leadership at Disneyland, and then went to the scene, which of course had been totally altered. And when the chief of police was challenged about this, he made the comment that he found that in many of his many years in law enforcement, going immediately to the scene of the crime was rarely productive. That was an amazing quote that got him in just a little bit of trouble, as you can imagine. So what happens with what we do as lawyers is not only did we impact that case and the practices that were going on within Disneyland, which all my family loved, so yeah. I was not the most popular guy in the family at the time I'm taking on Disneyland. But the reality is that we found out that we were able to change the law, and that the law then put private amusement parks under regulation under OSHA with immediate investigations, safety concerns, safety rules, safety regulations, and safety follow-ups. And then what happened is another tragic incident happened just a few years later at the Big Thunder Mountain. As opposed to what happened in the Columbia incident, I got a phone call and was invited to go into the ride, into the tunnel where the incident occurred. It had been sealed off by the state to do their independent investigation, and I walked into that tunnel the same time the attorney for Disneyland walked in, the same time their expert walked in, same time my expert walked in, and we all walked in together to examine what the evidence was and what the facts were. That never would have happened but for a major change in state law. You
represented the Catholic Church in those in that terrible tragedy with the priest,
the whole cleric abuse
the
scandal.
Cleric abuse scandals, and you worked with the Diocese of Orange. Talk about that.
I did. As I already indicated at one point during our conversations, I was raised by a very, very Catholic mom, Mrs. O'Leary Aiken. And so when this happened, I got a call from the bishop, Bishop Brown. They were going to want to look into the whole problem. I was already getting phone calls to actually represent some of the victims. I felt uncomfortable doing that. I thought they absolutely deserved the best possible representation they could get. I felt somewhat conflicted with my church versus the victims, and it turns out when I talked with the bishop, I found and felt that I could do more to help resolve the problem rather than be engaged as in an advocacy role on behalf of one or more of the victims. So we formed a team of myself, Mark Robinson, and Justice Jack Trotter to review all of the cases, and concluded these cases were very serious, very substantive, created tremendous problems for the church. We had great leadership for which Bishop should be forever, Bishop Brown, be honored as a hero, in that he broke from all the other bishops and decided that what his first duty and responsibility, which was what I advocated to him, was to his own diocesan, his own parishes, the people that he represented. and that it was not in their best interest to continue with litigation, spending lots of money, losing lots of money, and making it a precarious situation for the diocese.
They did pay quite a bit, right?
They did.
How much do you recall?
My recollection is around $90 million or so, and I also work with the church to help much of that responsibility be transferred over to the insurance companies that insured the church, so that at least there was a major contribution there. Plus, we put it behind us. The bishop decided to sell Marywood and to basically consolidate, and it was, I thought, a brilliant move and a strong leadership role.
So you feel good about the role you played in this?
I felt very good. I think I felt more comfortable that I was able to make a difference, because in the process of being objective about these cases and saying how substantive they were and how tragic they were, and what I could tell the bishop as to how much money a jury was likely to award to all of these victims, I said, we should go and take care of these victims and see they're taken care of, and that is going to be, that money that's going to go to these deserving victims is going to be far better for the church than to try to wage a battle they were almost certainly going to lose in any event.
What was it like to be on that side of the table? Were you dealing with your fellow trial lawyers?
I was dealing with all my fellow trial lawyers, and I thought it actually helped me, because I think I had credibility with them, and I knew them, and I knew that I could rely on their candor, and they were very open in providing the evidence they had and looking at the files, and Justice Trotter was reviewing files. And so it really put us in a situation where we could really, I think, be more effective in helping these victims by representing the church than we could by representing them as claimants.
Okay, you have, in a long discussion we've been having, you've made a very eloquent argument for the importance of what you do and the law. Let me bring up a bugaboo of mine, which is these class action lawsuits. And just briefly, every viewer has encountered this. You get a postcard in the mail and you fill something out, and then because somebody said their submarine sandwich was 12 inches long and it's actually 11 3/4, so there's a class action suit. And you wind up getting, $10 worth of coupons for your next sandwich, and meanwhile the attorneys, get $2-3 million in fees. Isn't that system abused?
Well, number one, it's a good system. Number two, is it abused? Certainly. We're not saints. Maybe I am, but
yes.
Every trial.
Bishop Brown probably thinks you are. But
I don't know. I haven't talked to him recently. But the reality is that yes, there's going to be abuses. There was abuses in all of those cases involving the Nails and the Vietnamese community and all those rules, and there was a lot of not very good ethical lawyers jumping in. The problem is it's the old baby with the bathwater. We do need to work on these abuses and to correct them. But there's been overall a lot of good done in class actions, because a class action in principle is the fact that yes, this is a substantial wrong, but somebody gets away with the wrong because the amount of money involved is so small, it isn't economically feasible to hold them accountable. So they can run rampant. If you didn't have the class actions, they can run rampant. But there's going to be some abuses. So the focus should be on the abuses and eliminate those at every point that we see them, but not to eliminate the primary remedy.
So you think there could be some reforms?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it.
So let's continue with the education.
I'd like to talk a little bit, and I know you wanted me to talk, Rick, about the education and how I got to be where I was. We talked about a little bit what my motivation was, but how did it happen? How did it work? And it worked because we had this great education system. One thing I loved to point out to people was that I had 2 years of education at Santa Ana College, great 2 years of education at Santa Ana College, and I got charged $0 for tuition. So I had 2 years, 4 semesters of college education $0 tuition. Then I transferred to Cal State Fullerton. Cal State Fullerton was a very expensive institution for me to go to. They charged $50 a semester for me to go to Cal State Fullerton. So now I have $100 invested. And then I'm fortunate enough to get a scholarship to Marquette University after 3 years of college, so I got to save a year of education cost. And I come out of Marquette University with a scholarship, still had to have, bread and food and shelter and all of that. So I had an entire amount of $100 invested in tuition for 6 years of education. That model obviously is gone. And so one of the things that has drawn me to Chapman University is the fact that we are going to be working very strongly to reverse that trend that people are graduating from universities with heavy debt. I went to Chapman originally because of the law school through a professor who came out of, or a dean that came out of Mississippi. That's an interesting story in and of itself. And I got involved, and then I met some guy named Jim Doty who thought I should get more involved not only with the law school but the university as a whole. Then I ended up, of course, on the board of trustees.
And funny you should mention that. You're now chairman. You're the new chairman of the board of trustees, and here you are. You just received a doctorate, an honorary doctorate from Chapman. What I love about this picture is look at that. These are the folks who got the doctorates this time around, and you get top billing. There you are. You're next to Placido Domingo.
and so let me tell you a story. I think that is really worth sharing because it ties in both the law and education. In my role as a chairman of the board, the newest chairman of the board at Chapman, I get an opportunity to work with this dynamic new president, Daniele, at the same time having grown up as a trustee under the leadership of Jim Doty. And so we're going to look at all these major issues that the college are facing. And Chapman, I think, is positioned, and Orange County should be so proud that Chapman is not only probably already a major national institution, it's going to be bigger and better, and not necessarily bigger, higher quality, bigger in its goals, bigger in its ambitions. And so it's something that I think we all should be really very, very proud of. And what I remember one time you and I were talking about what was your saddest moment in the law, and what are your biggest disappointment, what is you thought the most thing you feel good about. And of course we had a chance to talk a little bit about Disneyland and about some of the other cases that I handled. But I'll tell you the one that moves me the most is, and it was featured in the Register just this weekend. A young boy named Marty O'Connor graduated from Chapman University and got his master's degree. Marty is an outstanding young man who was totally paralyzed when he fell down some steps. And we had the honor of representing Marty and his family, and were able, through our case that we handled, to get substantial resources for Marty that will see that he has the support and help he needs as a person who is permanently paralyzed for the remainder of his lifetime. But Marty, being one of those special people, he decided he wanted to get his master's degree. And to enable him to do that, we took him in at Chapman. I wrote a letter on his behalf as his lawyer, and what a special case he was. So he got into the master's program in business, and to be able to help him do that, his mother attended every single class with him. And just this last weekend, he got his master's degree at Chapman, and they gave a special master's degree to his mother, who attended every class, helped him through every decision that had to be made, and worked with him in partnership with her son. Now, it's the greatest, warmest story you can think of. It reflects well on Chapman, reflects well on the legal system that allowed him to have the resources, reflects well on Marty O'Connor himself and what a special person he is, reflects incredibly, fantastically on his mother. And to me, when people talk about how did they get that money, and why did they get that money, and why should they have that money, there's lots of stories and answers, and this is a number one type of story that says, isn't that heartwarming? That reflects on the institution and all the other things that we're trying to do, and it reflects on what we're all about, which is the kids.
Great.
And even special kids like Marty O'Connor.
That is a great story, and Wiley, we could probably go 3 shows, but we absolutely can't do that. So now a disclosure, Chapman University is a sponsor of this show. And that's it for now. Thanks again to my guest, Wiley Aitken. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.